Creepy and Geeky. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, we're talking about Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to you. Joining me today is DeVaughn Taylor. DeVaughn is a co-host of the Specter Cinema Club podcast and a rotating panelist on The Pod and the Pendulum. Welcome to the show, DeVaughn.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to get creepy and or geeky.
Well, we're going to get a little bit of both today, I think. All right. Well, first up, since you're new to the show, I like to ask guests, what was your first horror movie?
You know, it's like I kind of go back and forth because I truly don't know which one it was. I know the first batch of movies that I saw, and I know what was not first. The Fly was third, and that was like the one that like kind of like really like flipped a switch. But between which one was actually first, it's either Cube or Nightmare on Elm Street. But I do have just both vivid memories of watching those around the same time. And it was two different movies from like the two like kind of primary like horror bearers in my life, I guess, because like my mom, she's big into horror movies, and it was fun because my dad hates them, so it was like me and her, that was like kind of like our thing, you know. So she got me started on Nightmare on Elm Street like pretty early, and then my uncle showed me Cube, and then he was the one that kind of like showed it, like he had like a massive collection and stuff, so like that through him is where I found like the more like cult favorites and stuff and like genre films like that. And I remember Cube being one of those ones that like was like one of the first things to like scare me because it was like so realistic. So it was interesting having the two of those to like kind of start. One of them was like a super realistic thing that I was like, oh my God, what if I was in this situation, versus Nightmare is like, the more supernatural one, but still, created a different type of fear. So it was one of those two.
Okay. All right. That's cool. And then you, after that point, you, became a lifelong horror fan, or?
I mean, it was like there? I definitely watched horror all throughout my life. I'll say like kind of where I like made the transition of like kind of like more dedicating myself to it would have been more like 2014 ish. I remember it was after I saw It Follows. That was like kind of one of the films that kind of like changed my brain into thinking like, because at first it was like more about like, just like the funness of it all and, trying to find stuff that was scary. But then, of course, as you like get older and they become less scary, then that's like whenever I like started like being like, oh, there's like so many storytelling possibilities here and so many different styles that you can put into it. And on our podcast, we focus on subgenres of horror. And like, that's like the thing that kind of intrigues me is like, like horror is such a big umbrella and there's like so many different kind of types that have different functions for the film, under the big horror umbrella. So around that time was kind of whenever my brain was just like kind of opened up a little bit more. And then I was also writing for some websites and they would just start sending me like pretty much only horror stuff because they like noticed like that was probably where my best writing was coming from. So like, all right, so I guess that's like why I became like a horror guy, I guess.
I hear you. I was the same way. I grew up in the 80s, and as listeners know, that I dabbled here and there. I would watch things and enjoy stuff like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and the Friday the 13th movies, and the Scream movies I was really big into and still am, but I got really big into them, but I wasn't super into horror at that point. And it wasn't until about 2018 or so that I really got into it like much, much deeper. And now it's like become a whole huge facet of my life, so much so that now I'm podcasting about it. So
yeah, I feel like it kind of makes like an interesting experience too whenever you like watch one of the ones that you did watch when you were younger, but then you like don't watch it for a while, and then like now you with like horror history and knowledge and knowledge about how films are made now, it's like it makes like a completely different watch, and you're like, oh yeah, like I remember enjoying this whenever I was a kid because I knew in that one scene I might see some side boob, and now it's like, you watch it and it's like, oh, hey, this was actually like a really good movie. And I wasn't like paying attention to anything.
Or you go back and you watch movies that you thought were really, really good. And now they're just, you realize through your more sophisticated grown-up taste, you're like, man, this movie sucks. So
oh yeah, I mean, you definitely have those moments, but like I'll stick to my guns. I'll watch something that I'm like, yeah, it's not good, but I see where my brain was at the time, and like and that still matters in the movie, even so. It's like, yeah, it's always a funny little experience.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right. Well, speaking of, we are talking about Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You. And these are movies that right out of the gate, I have loved. These are top tier, absolutely some of the best movies to me. I get that they're not everybody's taste. I get that some people think they're not, that maybe the second one's not nearly as much horror as the first one, and even the first one's not super amount of horror because there's too much comedy or whatever. But I fully believe that they are horror movies, and I love them both because of the comedy and because of the horror, and they do a good job at doing both for the most part. I know number two dabbles more into science fiction and all that, but I still feel like there's just enough horror in it to keep it going. But how do you feel about these movies?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like where they sit on the horror scale, like they both sit firmly in the genre camp, especially the first one. And I think definitely the second one took people a little off guard with us switching the subgenre kind of so drastically, but it still has so much of the DNA of the first one. And I feel like that might be a recurring element in the conversation, is like I do appreciate the first one like way more than the second one, but not to say that the second one's bad. It's just it's different in the way that they kind of took the pieces from the first one and then made it its own thing. Like, so like the fact of the second one working the way it does for being so different is still a testament to that movie itself, even if I do still prefer the first one. But I remember seeing the first one, and like I remember when it was announced and everything, it just felt so fresh. Like there was it felt familiar, where we are seeing tropes that we know and things like that, but it also felt fresh. And it was I like a kind of elevator pitch type movie, like somebody was like, you could easily sell this to somebody saying, hey, this is Groundhog's Day but as a slasher, boom, like that, and like you can kind of sum it up pretty succinctly. But then the first one does function like very well on its own as a like, so even if you don't love the second one as much, like you can still kind of just watch the first one as its own standalone thing. And I think the only reason that works is because we still haven't gotten a third one. I know talks have been up and down, but apparently it's not looking great on a third one coming, which really sucks, because I feel like a nice trilogy to round it out would help the second one in its own way. But since there's only two, I feel like that's the reason people kind of weight so heavily onto the first one. But yeah, it's just it's so fresh. Like Tree as a character was a very fascinating final girl to me that we'll kind of get into a little more. But and using the premise in a way that was interesting, but then in the first one they also, since they don't explain it until the second one, the first one functions really well, is at being just super vague, and they just don't explain it, and you're just like, well, all right, like, and you kind of have no choice but to just accept it because the movie's not going to give it to you. So the first one works in its own very special way, but I think the way that the second builds off of it still deserves a lot of credit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Did you get to see these in the theaters, or did you just wait for video? How did you see these?
I know I watched the first one in theaters. I think the second one I might have not seeing it until it went to streaming, because I think it was in and out of the theaters pretty fast, because the first one did, the first one was like a modest, like a moderate, like surprise success. And then the second one, like second one made its money back and stuff. It wasn't a flop by any means, but it also like didn't make as much of a profit as the first one. So that's kind of part of the reason the third never happened. So I think the second one I probably didn't see until like streaming after.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I was actually kind of opposite on that. I think the first one came out, and I didn't know much about it or anything, and I missed it in theaters, watched it on video, blown away by it, and then when the second one was coming out, I was like, okay, I got to go see this one theaters for sure. So I know I definitely saw the second one in the theater, but not the first one. Yeah, I'm hoping they do a third. Fingers crossed on that, because I would love to see that storyline finished, and I really hope that the proposed Freaky and Happy Death Day crossover happens as well. That would be a lot of fun.
I mean, I'm actually against that. Because only because, like, I mean, not that I don't like Freaky. I thought Freaky was like fun, but I also like haven't watched it or thought about it since it came out. So I'm like, it was like solid, and I would want this franchise to get its own due, like it's proper due diligence, give it its trilogy, and then let Freaky kind of do its own thing as well. With so much, I don't know, I feel like I might also be one of the people that's like kind of getting that multiverse fatigue of everything crossing over in different timelines and all these different things, and we already have that in the Death Day movies, so I was like, I don't want to introduce another story in, even though it's like, yes, they are made by the same studio, and it would make sense and it would be fun, but I would love to see again, just to this franchise to be like, because then it's like, this was an original idea, its own thing, and to see it, be a fully formed franchise, I think would be great, especially because I think Tree's final, character arc exploration in a third movie, kind of deserves its own thing, rather than her like kind of fighting for screen time with Vince Vaughn and the other gal.
No, I get that, and I do think that I would love to see Freaky get its own sequels and stuff as well, and have this. I imagine what would be best was Freaky get at least its own little sequel, maybe a trilogy of its own. Tree get hers finished off, and then maybe some kind of fun crossover, kind of down the road would be interesting. And like we said, with the multiversal aspect of that's been introduced in the second movie, that they could easily pop into each other's universes without any hard explanation behind it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the logic would make sense for sure. Like maybe give the Happy Death Day its own thing, and then like in a sequel or maybe even sidequel for Freaky can Tree can like kind of pop in for a nice little appearance or something.
Yeah, I don't want it to be part of that. I don't want it to be part of their own franchises or something like that. I imagine it'd be something more of like a Freddy versus Jason type situation, where it's kind of like their stories have been told enough, and then we can have some kind of just fun side fun thing that they do together.
So
go ahead.
No, you're good. If you were to kind of get your way for a Happy Death Day 3, what would the tone would you want? Because for me, I know that I definitely missed a little bit more of the horror elements in the second one, but I'm not one of the people that doesn't think that the comedy doesn't work, because it totally does, and it's very charming and stuff. So like if first one we kind of had the straightforward like comedy, but like also like a giallo vibe a little bit, and then second one we get like sci-fi explanation for like the events. So like where would you want the tone to be for the third one?
I don't know. That's an interesting question, because I mean, obviously with the end scene, we get set up with DARPA coming in and doing this whole other thing going on, that they set up sort of a sequel right there of having her her nemesis Danielle be the one now stuck in the time loop. So it'd be interesting to have some kind of, I don't know. I mean, obviously it's going to be a comedy. Obviously it's going to be it's going to involve the time loop. But I don't know like what kind of, I hadn't really thought about what kind of other genre they could mix in with it, since we already got kind of horror and sci-fi.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think with the premise, the meta route is like kind of like the easy way out, which I'm not against meta stuff as long as it's like done well, but I feel like even like the latest Scream movies, like the meta aspect is kind of run its course a little bit, but I could totally see him doing that. But then like, I don't know, maybe for this one, since it's like, if it's Danielle and then like, and then if Tree, obviously gets looped back into it, like, I think it would be fun to like just go like full, like more like psychological, like kind of fever dream-esque, where they're just like maybe they're, because they're in the loop, it's like altered their mind in a certain way or something, and like, and they like kind of, like it like kind of maybe alters Tree's reality, because she's just so used to all these different time loops and time traveling, and she's like,
right.
I mean, she's done weeks and months worth of time travel by the end of Happy Death Day 2. Like, she has to play the long game in that movie. So it's like in the third one, she could like kind of be just like unraveling from like all this like temporal displacement.
True. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. I like it. Hopefully Christopher Landon is working on something similar. Who knows? I know he's got an idea for it, but fingers crossed that Jason Blum will go ahead and put it out at some point. I mean, even if they just put it out on streaming, I would enjoy that. I would love it out in a movie, but if they're gonna do it, do it in streaming at the very least.
Yeah, that'd be a case where that would work out. Like obviously, like people weren't coming out, in the theaters for the second one, so it's like this would be the one that like it wouldn't feel like a step down or anything. It'd be like, no, this is like for the people that like totally want it. Like, and I could totally see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go back to number one. The first one came out, and like I said, we've mentioned, it's more of a straight up slasher film. Tree keeps reliving the same day, keeps getting killed by somebody in a baby face mask. Which was an interesting choice. And it's just, to me, it's just the concept of the time loop, which we've seen before and stuff like, Groundhog Day, which actually gets referenced in the movie towards the end. It's interesting to get this conceit in a horror movie, and I don't know. I'm sure it's been done before in a horror movie, but this seems to be the biggest one that's done it, and it just works so well. And like you said, with Tree being the final girl, we get somebody who you hate in the beginning. She is absolutely a terrible person in the beginning, and through the course of this constant time loop and dying and everything like that, she's got to figure out not only who it is that's trying to kill her, but why. And when she reflects on that, it gives her character development that you wouldn't normally get in a movie like this. Normally she just would be killed off early, and then somebody else would be the final girl. And so it's a fun movie because of that. We get this final girl who, is somebody you hate in the beginning, and by the end of it, you just absolutely love her.
Oh yeah, like Tree is, the reason these movies work. Like, she's so refreshing because like she's flawed. We are kind of so conditioned in a lot of movies that like, like you see it online whenever like people say like, oh, like, I love the movie, but I like couldn't get behind the main character. And like, I see that people kind of struggle when you have an unlikable protagonist, like somebody that you just, naturally don't like, but like there's a reason for that, and and she's, you know, because I feel like we also see so many horror movies where it's like a good person, you know, like has something traumatic happens and then they have to like learn to like rebuild themselves, you know, in some way, versus in this, I like that we do already kind of have this, you know, flawed, terrible kind of mean girl s character, and they play to that, you know, that prototype in the beginning of the movie with her. But then, you know, as you get to know Tree throughout the movie, and she learns things, you know, through this repetition, and you know, like it's an interesting testament of like, hey, it like takes time to like, you know, change as a person, but like she kind of has this luxury of, you know, this thing happening over and over again, so she kind of gets that. So in a movie, we actually do get to see somebody like make, you know, real progress and become a better person, you know, and actually learn something through this experience that she's having, rather than it just being this, you know, like survival situation that's going to like impact her, you know, like, you know, negatively, like in the future. It's like, no, this is like more something. I was like, yeah, it's a terrible thing that happened to her, but like this is, you know, very much happening for the better of her. And like, and she becomes a just truly better person throughout, and is so convincing. And Jessica Rothy just has such a great charisma on screen. Like I'd never seen her in anything before. So it was just like so nice, like seeing just like an unknown just like come on and just like be so instantly endearing and fun, and really doing everything that she's asked in this movie, whether it be the comedy, playing the horror, playing the bitch at the beginning, you know, playing the emotional beats when, you know, information about her mother is revealed. Like she's really doing a lot in this movie, and she does it all fantastically.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, she runs through the gamut of like everything. I mean, because you like you said, I mean, we get her really, she's like this terrible, terrible person. She's like sleeping with her teacher who's married. She's, you know, just horrible to her friends. She's just, it's just, she's just a bad person. And then you find out, you know, it's her birthday, that she shared with her mom, and her mom's dead. And so she's got this emotional aspect going on, so you start to feel for her. And as she goes along, she just, you know, as she has to continually, because at first you don't care that she dies, you're just like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then when she keeps having to do this, and especially once she has to do it over and over and over again to figure out who it is, that, you know, as she's doing that and figuring it out, she's actually having to make that self-examination of herself, which you don't get to see a lot of times with characters like this. That as she goes along, you get kind of to the root of everything, and you realize that deep down she is a good person. She's just been, you know, beaten down by life, and it's made her this harder, you know, kind of bitchier person. And it's good to see her kind of like strip that away and get back to her core of being a good person, you know, and just, you know, by the end of it, you know, you're rooting for her. You're like, yes, you know, you're hoping she's going to get out of it, and when she does, you're super happy about it.
Yeah, she has a really cool like path of acceptance. Like she has to accept that, like, hey, like, yes, I know like things have not been great in my life, but like that also doesn't give me an excuse to be a shitty person to everyone else, you know? So she like has like that acceptance, and also like, because that it kind of comes in a point where she's like, you know, has no hope in the situation. She's just like, well, I'm just going to keep living this. So like, okay, if I'm going to keep doing this loop over and over again, like I might as well try and make the best of it. So it's like there's something very you know, very just human in all of that. And she's just yeah, fantastic, and just like every emotion that she gets to do throughout this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too, because the mechanism of the time loop in the first one, you know, we don't find out what's causing the time loop. We just, you know, and a lot of these time loop movies, you never find out exactly what's causing this person to do this. Generally speaking, the time loop is a device to take a, if we're going to reference Groundhog Day, take a terrible person and end up making them a better person in the end. So it's to change the person and give them this opportunity to better themselves over the course of the same day over and over and over again, until they've gotten to the point where they can get past that terrible day. And so it's interesting to watch this And so with this time loop, I don't even remember where I was going with this, but it's oh man, my brain just died. Go ahead.
I think I know where you were kind of going, was like because the movie, like the first one, before we know it's actual time travel, like yeah,
Yeah.
we're calling it a time loop. It is just like kind of this recurring situation that we don't know. But even, it kind of begs the question on like how much of it they did kind of have planned for the sequel, because like, they have the
Right.
blackouts and then they explain that in the second movie. But then were they, I wonder how committed they were to time travel at this point, because like even though it's not explicitly time travel, they're still using the tropes of that genre in the first
Right.
movie. Because typically the lesson that someone learns in a time travel movie is like, no, you can't use this event or you can't use this phenomenon to change an event, but you can use it to change yourself. And that's usually like the journey that person learns. So it's like they still embedded it with her character arc,
Right.
even if they weren't sure where they were going as far as this time loop. But again, I like that in the first one, it is not explained. We don't really like, it's consistent, and you can learn things about like the way that it works, but like it's never given to us though. And something about that ambiguity I really like, because then it kind of just gives you wiggle room in kind of what you can do. I've always said in the problem with time travel movies is like, when you do try to explain it and try to make sense of it, and it's like, we're never going to be able to, because we can't do it. We haven't done it yet. So until that happens, we're never going to be able to try to make sense of it. So so no matter how much you try in a time travel movie, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot somewhere. So I feel like that's why the first one works, because they don't try to explain it. So it kind of gives them a pass to, make some mistakes here and there.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's interesting is that even when they do explain it in the second movie, they're explaining it, and it's kind of a vague way. They're explaining that it's a time loop and that it's connected to this multiverse thing and everything like that, but it's still pretty vague. It's a way to explain it without fully explaining it. They're fudging it still a lot, which is great. I'm fine with that, because like you said, when you try to over explain it and try to connect it with something bigger or whatever, that it always fails. It just doesn't make sense.
And I feel like they kind of went that route into, is where they over explained it so much to a degree that it doesn't make sense. So that way it's still okay. Like, cause like the second one legit confuses me. And like, there's a few like holes in like there's like certain moments where you're like, okay, this character could be either one of these characters, but we don't know. And like all the, like the second one legit gets confusing. I feel like even that's on purpose, to where they're just going the other end of it. Like, oh yeah, we're just gonna explain it so much that it doesn't matter, that you're just gonna like kind of give up.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah, I could see that too. Yeah, no, but I find it interesting too, because not only is she trying to improve herself with Tree, she's trying to improve herself over the course of it. And it's not even that she's necessarily trying to improve herself. It's actually just kind of happening accidentally. It's actually not a conscious thing on her part. She's not, going through and going, okay, well, maybe if I become a better person, this will be better. It's just kind of she just strips. So as things are happening, the bad aspects of her kind of strip away, and you begin to see the real Tree, the one who's actually kind of underneath it all. And that's what's good about it too, is it's like not her actively trying to change her person.
That's what it would be if it was like the 90s. It would, like, if this was like a 90s movie, or like even an early aughts movie, like that would be the thing, is like, oh, like some old person would be like, well, maybe if you start being a good person, this will stop happening to you. And then that like, triggers it. And then, but like you said, like it's more out of the happenstance of like, again, she like almost thinks that she's just kind of fucked at this point, and she's like, well, I'm here, so I mean, I guess I might as well like try to do things a little differently, and whatever,
see what works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because in this one she's got her love interest, which is the guy named Carter, who she keeps waking up to every morning. And there's a funny bit in the movie that he's constantly, every time she wakes up, he's constantly looking under some desk and like looking for something. And that it's a funny gag that eventually gets explained in number 2. And it's the stupidest, most useless explanation ever. And I love it because of that, because all he was looking for was his mouth guard under there. So it's great because, people were theorizing like, whoa, what was he looking under there for? Was it something important? And it's literally the least important thing in the world. I mean, it's important to him, of course, but it's the least important to the story. But it's just, but going back to Carter himself, I like that he's kind of an emotional support for her, but he's not trying to. He helps kind of with some ideas and stuff, but she really comes up with the bulk of what she needs to figure out. He's not. He's more of a sounding board than anything else, and I like that he's not a guy trying to control anything in this. The character is just there to be a foil for her more than anything else. She is very strongly the main character. She has all of her own agency and everything, and doesn't need to be saved by the guy or anything. She really is, in both of these movies, she's really the full-on protagonist and the main character, and I love that about it.
Oh yeah. Every year on Twitter.com, I give a award for Good Boy of the Year for horror movies because most guys in horror movies, they suck for good reason, but like it's usually like has something to do with the plot and stuff. And my criteria for Good Boy of the Year is, one, they just have to be a just good guy, like wholeheartedly, no ulterior motives. But it also, like, I call it Good Boy because they are kind of like dogs usually, because they are there to support the main character. Like you said, like he's there, and like this isn't. And the first one, like, isn't meant to be have the romantic angle to it. There's, they're not like, doing like cute date situations throughout the movie. It's like, no, he's like trying to help her figure out why she's not dying. And the thing with the movie is that, like, shows why he is just such like a purely good guy is throughout most of the movie, it's him meeting her for the first time again.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're having this like built history throughout this experience. He doesn't remember. She keeps remembering these different experiences with him, but he doesn't know that. So like literally every time is him being just a good guy that meets her for the first time and is willing to help her. And like the fact that he consistently does that, it just like shows that it's just like, oh yeah, no matter what time reality, he's just going to be a good guy. And then that's when she, starts to fall for him, just like, experiencing that over and over again, like kind of, building this bond with him that he doesn't even know about. He's just a blissfully unaware golden retriever there to do whatever she needs him to do. And we love him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Carter is one of the best good boys there are in horror for sure. I like that. That's funny. But that did remind me of what I was going to mention, was that she and now it just left my brain again. Oh my God. You had mentioned something while you were talking about it. Oh, her remembering during each of these loops, which is, integral to the time loop thing, is that the protagonist, the person going through the time loop, remembers every little bit of this, and which is good. But also at the same time, in this one, it's interesting because she's getting killed each time, and that's what sets the time loop off. And that's what restarts her day, is that each time she is gaining damage. Whatever killed her or hurt her in the last one, she wakes up and she feels the pain from that still, which I thought was an interesting and unique aspect, because in Groundhog Day we didn't get that. Like, he would die and in all these different macabre ways, but he wasn't feeling that pain. He wasn't getting damaged each time. And this becomes a plot point in the movie as well, because at one point she's taken so much damage that when she wakes up, she ends up passing out and having to be taken to the hospital. And it's remarked upon that when she has an x-ray, that she has like years worth of damage inside of her, and it doesn't make any sense. And it was an interesting aspect.
Yeah. I mean, it was like a very cool way to put a body horror spin on, like, again, like this all this emotional trauma that she keeps within herself, but because of this series of events that they just like kind of keep coming to the surface, and then again, like, they physically manifest, but this is, of course, for her, like, just like kind of mental traumas that she's building up over time. And that also plays into, like time loop, time travel movies where you kind of have this like mental exhaustion that you take on from experiencing that. And like her thinking has to fundamentally change, once she kind of realizes like, okay, like I have to like go through life now, like thinking at some point somebody's going to kill me, and I have to like be like not terrified of that. And like, that's a hard thing to do. So it works out, again, taking the tropes of these types of movies and then applying it to her character arc. They just work in tandem like really well together. And of course, like, provide, nice horror montages as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because, after she realizes that she's getting damaged severely and that she can't take much more of that, or she will die, like, totally, that she like has to reorient instead of like, continuously dying over and over again, trying to figure out who it is. She's actually got to stop and think and try to piece this together in a better way, given the information she already has, and just stop and really consider all the possibilities. And so I think that was a good storytelling device to get that to take us into that moment, and to kind of lead us into the latter part of the movie.
Yeah, I think one thing that also sets Tree apart as a final girl is most final girls, they kind of fall into one of two categories. They're either the more reactionary ones. They're like kind of just like, dealing with the situation that's, going on, right, and they end up just like kind of more surviving, by the end, whether that's like a Sally or someone like that, or, or we have the like more proactive final girls, and like Tree kind of gets to do both in this movie. She like hits this like low point of like, feeling like she's, just like kind of fucked and like not going to get out of this situation, like kind of accepts this like, reactionary thing. But like you said, once she kind of figures out that she needs to do something, she very much flips it, and then she becomes this very like, proactive on the move. And she's, she's physically capable, she's adaptive, she's very clever thinking, and she really just like kind of gets to show off the range of what a final girl could be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm always happy when we get the more proactive final girls, somebody like Nancy from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and can't think of her name.
She reminds me of a Sydney too. She gives me a lot of Sydney vibes.
Yeah. Now Sydney, because Sydney starts out kind of like, reactionary, and then kind of builds towards that more proactive. So that's a good call. So I mean, it's and it's interesting that in this one it's so we get to find out that ultimately in the end it's her roommate who's trying to kill her, and who has set all this in motion because she's jealous because she's dating the teacher / doctor guy, and she wants to date the teacher / doctor guy. It's kind of a, like, to me, it's kind of a shitty motivation. But again, slashers are filled with like shitty motivations. The killers always have like the worst possible reasons for killing people. So it's in line with that. But it's kind of fun that when we get to the second movie, it gets flipped on its head. But before we get there, let me hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's why this kind of falls into like I feel like nobody talks about this as like a more of a modern giallo, as you kind of have the slasher angle, but the slasher angle is more focused on like the whodunit part of it versus like kind of the why of it all. That we are kind of focused on like, okay, if we figure out who the killer is, then this might change the situation. Not only that, you kind of have the hallmark with the black gloves and the iconic mask and everything, but like giallo movies, this kind of works mainly only the first one, because like once you realize that this is a sci-fi thing, then it kind of falls out of that camp. Giallo never really gets into sci-fi, but it does get into either, it gets into like illogical situations, whether it
Right.
be supernatural or not. And since we don't really know, so like that's kind of where I put that in this, and especially just because of and even the motivation part like falls into that, because like in Giallo movies, the motivation is always very dramatic, and I mean that's as dramatic as it can get. Like, oh my God, you're a shitty roommate, and I wish I was sleeping with the professor that you're sleeping with. Like that is, so like straight from the 70s. So yeah, it kind of falls into that, and I feel like that's kind of where the kills kind of fall into as well, because like this baby face doesn't have like a iconic weapon that uses it, like uses just like whatever is in the different vicinity for like that specific scenario. So we get like a lot of variety of these like kind of some ranging from very simple stabbings to then these like more elaborate like kind of things as well.
Right. No, yeah, definitely. I definitely see the comparisons with the Giallo, which always brings me back to that the Scream movies are very Giallo influenced as well.
Mm-hmm.
I will sing that to my dying day. Because it's exactly the same. The mask, the gloves, the shitty motivations, the very over dramatic reasonings, and everything, especially with the always like just always being tied to her and her family and everything. It's just crazy. But yeah, no, I see the same. I see what you're saying with the same aspects in this one, and I think that carries over into the next one as well. I think there's shallow touchstones. We getting in the sci-fi a little bit more, but whenever there's the killer involved, we've got the shallow aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
So but that goes into saying that with this one, with the first one, we also have an alternate ending. It wasn't used, but with this one, it has that the doctor himself was also involved, and we kind of get a tease in that in the movie itself. She does find a baby face mask in his drawer at one point and suspects him, but it ends up not being him in this movie. So it's an interesting thing that they put in the first one, and like I said, it doesn't get played into. But then when we get into the second movie, that actually becomes reality. In this alternate reality that Tree ends up being in, the doctor himself is the killer this time, and so it was a nice little twist to kind of have your cake and eat it too. So you get to have both versions, because in this new version, her roommate isn't the shitty person, like isn't trying to kill her, and they actually have this interesting resolution between them too. And it's nice to see that Tree as a person, she understands that this new reality is different, and that this girl isn't trying to kill her, and that she can kind of have that friend back in a way too, which was a nice a touch to it all.
Yeah, I wonder if that was like kind of a scenario where they like filmed that for the first one, but then like decided like, oh, hey, let's hold on to this because this could be something we could use in a sequel. And then like, put it as, deleted scenes for like Easter eggs and stuff, because, there are so many like small details from the first one that do carry over into the second one and either get
absolutely
paid off or, or like, added to in some degree. But yeah, so I definitely could. Again, I'm intrigued to see how much of this they were kind of thinking about when they did do the first one versus like then making the second one, being like, okay, well, what did we put in the first one? How can we make sense of this? So yeah, very very fun.
Yeah, no, and so speaking of number two, so we start over. It's now Tuesday. She was stuck on Monday. And now it's Tuesday. She's finally out of the time loop. And then we get Ryan, the roommate of Carter's, who kept coming in every time her time loop kept happening. And now he's experiencing the time loop. And now we find out that he's stuck in the time loop because of some strange device that they have. It's kind of the MacGuffin of the movie. It's called Sissy. And it's what's caused the time loop, and by some crazy circumstances, you get another version of Ryan who is I guess the future Ryan, who is traveling back in time to kill himself, which doesn't make sense. Time travels, wise, it doesn't make sense that he's trying to kill himself, but that's what's happening in the time loop. He kills himself, and then it just keeps resetting. So he's not even like, even future Ryan is kind of screwed up the whole thing and created the time loop. So it's just weird.
Yeah, I mean, just off the gate, like it's such an interesting move to take the character that in the first movie, the only thing he's there to do is to bust in the door and say, "Are you done with that sweet vagina?" And then now he becomes the co-lead in the second one. Like to do that is just impressive in itself. I find that hilarious. I do like, I like how the beginning is such a nice bridge, between the two movies. Like I love when a horror movie picks up like literally the minute after the first one ended. Like I'm a sucker for that. I feel like we don't do that enough. So I love that they like pick it up right there. We see them having to like match the continuity to the scene from the end of the first one, into this one, and like with the costuming as well, which I have more on later. But yeah, it was super. It was a super cool way to like kind of switch it up and like kind of give you the familiar beats from the first one. Like now we see Ryan like doing the walk, and he sees the repeating motif stuff. So it's like catching you back up, and like and it's in a weird, interesting way. Like you could almost watch Happy Death Day to You by itself if you really wanted to. Like obviously, like it would be better if you watch it with the first one, but like with the way that it recaps and like shows stuff from the first movie and like kind of catches you back up, it almost could be its own thing within itself. It's interesting. But yeah, so I like the and they kind of keep that, like you said, like the giallo aspect does bleed into this one. Really mainly to like kind of keep that continuity as far as like the tone and stuff, while it does very much kind of again change kind of the whole trajectory of everything of it, being like, okay, this is firmly a sci-fi thing now.
Right. Yeah, and since Ryan is now stuck in the time loop, they're trying to get it fixed after they meet future Ryan. They're trying to get it fixed, and then they set off the device, and it ends up shunting Tree into another reality, and so now Tree wakes up. She feels like it's the same day again. She's reliving that Monday again, but things are just slightly off. Things start out okay. It seems like it's the same day again, but then she starts to notice that things are slightly off, and then she realizes, mostly when Danielle arrives and starts kissing Carter, that something is wildly off, and they realize that she's now in an alternate reality, alternate timeline where things have gone quite different, and including when she goes to meet her dad for her birthday lunch and finds that her mom is still alive in this reality. Which was nice in a way to see, her get this moment to reconnect with her mom after, the several years had passed since she had died. So it was a nice touching moment that she gets to relive some of that.
It's interesting because I remember when this came out, and I remember, aside from like changing the tone a little bit and the things like that, the other criticism I saw is like, okay, does this movie like undo the character arc from the first movie that Tree has? And it does in a way, but at the same time it does in a way that makes sense for this story. And it's an interesting exploration of, again, like when you watch a horror movie and you think of like how that character is going to be like afterwards, it's like, okay, like is it truly going to change them, or is it going to be also like something that they forget about in a couple of years and then revert back to themselves? So it's like, I like with this one, it adds another layer to Tree's arc of being like, of really testing or be like, hey, are you truly different now, after this situation? Or if given the opportunity, would you kind of revert back to like, because she, accepts, her mother's death and like kind of, takes a step past that. And then to have this premise do the thing where it's like, okay, well, now you have the option where you could live in a reality where she exists. Like, have you truly learned your lesson, or are you going to kind of fall into like the typical mistakes of a time travel movie? So again, they're playing on the tropes of the genre again.
Right. No, and I like that too, that, because they do that, they give her this test. They test her resolve and say, hey, do you want to give up what you have currently to have back your mom? And for anybody that in that situation, that would be a hard choice, especially because she's obviously very close with her mom. They have a great relationship, and you can see how much in just the first movie, you can see just how much that hurt her. But you can see, but like we said, with that first movie, she grew and changed and evolved during that movie to get past that and to find her back to herself again, and trying to move on. And now you put this speed bump of, well, she doesn't have to move on. Now she can have her mom, but she doesn't get to have Carter. And how does that affect things? And sure, it's like, okay, most people would be like, yeah, I would rather have my mom than some guy, but she talks to her mom, and her mom says, I would want to be with your dad because I got you. And that, like, as much as she wants her mom and everything like that, she realizes that she can't be stuck in the past, that she has to move on and has to move forward. And as much as yes, it's going to hurt and it sucks to have lost her mom, that moving forward is the better choice. And I like that they give her this hard, this very difficult decision to make. And she, obviously it's the writers or whatever like that, but Jessica Rothe definitely, does such a good job at playing this. Like we mentioned before, I mean, she runs the gamut of everything. She's very funny, but she's very emotional too in this movie, and it's very cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big thing to like kind of make that be, your overarching theme for this movie, basically being like, hey, like, like you're kind of having to make the choice of like, what you want versus like, obviously, like the thing that's going to be better for you. And like, it's an interesting like statement to like have a movie where you're like, hey, you're kind of going to be a better person, or the person that you are, due to, the trauma that you deal with this death. But then the things that you learn from other people because of this is going to make you the better person versus if you didn't go through that. That's a crazy thing to do in this, also very silly, repetitive sci-fi horror comedy as well. Like, so it's like them to kind of sneak a very big idea into this movie is very sneaky. And like you said, you have to have Jessica Rothe's performance to be able to really sell it, like, and, see her kind of going through these things. And I love seeing, expanding her character in this as well. Like, like showing that, the things that she's capable of, like, she is like kind of still portrayed as like, the typical like blonde, like popular mean girl or popular, like, pretty girl and stuff. And then it's like in this one, when people doubt her on like, being able to like learn all this, science, time travel stuff, she's like, okay, no, I'm going to double down. I'm going to show you that I can do it. And you don't really see long game kind of plans in movies anymore, because obviously everything kind of happens so fast. But with the premise of this, it's like she literally has to just spend weeks doing time traveling and killing herself to like learn more and like use the time travel to like be able to learn all this information. She like basically becomes a scientist throughout the course of the movie, which is pretty fucking awesome. Like she kind of goes through
like
that,
a quantum physicist.
Literally, she learns quantum physics and time travel in like in like a month and a half span. And it was super cool kind of getting to see that, and it uses again the premise in a smart way. But then I guess I saw on your outline, you said places for fun facts. And one thing I really appreciate about this one was with the wardrobe to Tree. So I was like looking up because I was thinking about them having to match the looks from the first one.
Right.
And the first one doesn't have many looks. So they said they only had to match 2 looks from the first movie into the second one. But then they made it a point to give Tree 15 new looks in this movie because in the first one, she's wearing the exact same outfit for like 75% of the movie. And so like, and you don't really think about that, because you're, thinking about the premise. And then like, so you kind of forget like, how much you learn about somebody through their clothing. So they like wanted to give her like all these different looks to like express her personality more, since we like really didn't get to learn about her in the first one. And I thought that was a really cool touch.
Yeah, no, and I'm definitely a big fan of the FML shirt that she wears in this, because it's funny just on its own, but at one point they're going through the montage and they're just trying over and over and over again, because what she's having to do with this learning these quantum physics and everything, they're having to try out these different algorithms every time, and when they don't work, she dies and comes back. And so each time it just is like, okay, they keep failing, and at one point she's sitting there next to Ryan and it fails, and then she just smiles at him and just pulls her shirt down and shows the FML. It just like, that's what it is. So it's a really fun touch with that, with the clothing as well. So I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, we definitely get to and because it's like funny to think about too, like if like you like spent the entire first movie like doing that and like wearing the same things, like you get annoyed. So it's like almost that she makes it a point to be like, well, if I'm gonna keep doing all this like time traveling, I need to switch it up, and then I love how they also use that to, that's where we get kind of the repeated kill motif in for this one of her like having to learn the algorithm and get into this one.
Now, this one for me, this repeated death montage, we get them in both movies, but this one is my favorite, mostly because it uses Paramore's Hard Times song during it, and it's just such a fun sequence, especially the bit where she's jumping out of the plane, because so she keeps so amongst all this, so she's like, not only is she having the stress of having to learn all these and having to die each time, and they figure out it's better for her to just try to kill herself rather than to
wait for the killer to like find her and stuff. Yeah.
And so she's fine, so we get all these montages of her, finding creative ways to do this. And meanwhile, she keeps seeing Carter and Danielle on this bench kissing. And so it's frustrating to her because, she's in love with Carter. And, again, Carter doesn't know because he's stuck in the same day. He resets every day. And so, and in this reality, him and Danielle are together, and it doesn't matter to her, to him. And so she just keeps getting like, it's stewing and stewing over it. So this moment, this culmination of this sequence is she goes to skydive, but without a parachute. She's just in her, like, I guess, underwear in this sequence. It's
like in a bikini.
Yeah, so in a bikini kind of underwear style thing. So she literally jumps out of the airplane with no parachute on, no jumpsuit or anything. And just as she's about to land, they slow it down, and she's like dropping right in front of Carter and Danielle. And she just like is looking straight at the camera, flipping it off, and just splat, and they get sprayed in blood. It is hilarious. It's a great sequence.
Yeah, it's like, in the first one, the montage is like trying to like find the different ways to like be creative and like kill her and like show the killer like being while relentless and stalking
a different person.
So it's like a different type. It's like more, it's supposed to be like more stressful and like whatnot. And like you said, this one, it's like all about having fun, because like now we're a second movie and we're totally in on the premise and know how it works. So like it is just them having super fun with it. They get to be a smidge more explicit in this one, even though they're both PG-13, which is the these are definitely both movies that I point out as saying like, hey, PG-13 movies, they work if you are smart with editing and things like that, and if you're creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that complains about PG-13 horror movies not being good or creative or anything is just not watching the right movies, because there's lots of PG-13 horror movies that very much will push the envelope and are very good because of it.
I mean, this movie would have been too easy to be PG-13. Like they all could have just been like a montage of these like grisly deaths and things like that. And like, but that's kind of lazy. Like they wanted kind of the extra talent to like being a little creative with it. And again, like it comes from like the way that they edit stuff with like the way that they like match cut like scenes to scenes are always really fun and stuff like that. And like the, going from her being killed to then like it makes sense that like we wouldn't see the kill part because as soon as it happens, that's when it restarts. So it's like it all works together in that way. The first one, I would say that my favorite would be the bong kill, because I am a stoner and I think that's very fun to break a bong outside of a bed and get somebody with it. So that's my favorite one for the first one. Then the second one is I just love her jogging and diving headfirst into a wood chipper, because it's also a pun. Her name is Tree. It's all fantastic. And so love that one.
No, anytime there's a wood chipper, it's always a good death scene. We got this one, we got Tucker and Dale versus Evil, you got Fargo. Anytime there's a wood chipper, it's a party.
Oh yeah, you cannot go wrong with a wood chipper, and I think that's like the most like blood we get to see in between the two movies as well. Like it spits out some chunks, and that's super fun.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great scene. And that's part of the montage as well. It's such a like, and for me, I really enjoyed the second movie. It's funny too, because I had actually had a lower grade for it. Both of these movies for me are 5 stars on Letterboxd now, because I love them. I enjoy them. I get why people might not like number 2 as much as the first one, but I think especially because I watched them back to back yesterday before doing this, that they're very good in tandem with each other, and I think that that's the kind of the best way to watch them is back to back, because you get all that fun and everything that they're trying to do. And that's what's funny too. You could consider this, like some ill-informed people would consider these movies lazy, because you're just kind of repeating over and over again. But that actually takes talent to make it interesting and fun, because not only, yes, you're having to repeat aspects and stuff, but you're having to repeat them and do them slightly different or make them more interesting each time, so it's not just the same scene over and over and over again.
Oh yeah, like it's a very hard thing to do. Like not only to do that, but and that's why like I don't fault the second movie at all. Like I wouldn't say it's like an inferior movie. It's just it's definitely a preference thing. Like of the tone and subgenres. Like like would I have wanted it to be as comedic as it is? No, but like is it not? But is it funny though? Like yeah, it's a funny movie. It's not like the comedy doesn't work. Like there's some hilarious bits in the second one, because they really do lean into it. The comedy is darker, since they do play into the killing herself stuff, but then like the scene where Danielle's acting blind in the library is so fucking stupid and hilarious. So it's like, it's not that it's not working, it's just not exactly what I want between the two movies,
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like that's also part of the reason that they had to make such a big subgenre shift, is because to keep it from feeling stale. Like if they, kept it in the horror realm, then it just feels like you're copying and pasting. So it's like they had to, go very drastic, leaning into the sci-fi and comedy more to still set it apart while still being able to use the same premise.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the most fun aspect of it is that you have to make that tonal shift. Because otherwise, I mean, yeah, I get the complaint. I understand the complaints that you want a horror movie again, but you couldn't do that in that same way, because we'd already had that. You already have that in the first movie. So you have to kind of make a slight tonal shift. And they can, and I think that they definitely go in the other direction a lot with the comedy and stuff, but it works very well, like you said. And we talked about how Ryan was this side character who didn't get much in the first movie, but that's the same with Danielle too. She only got a couple of scenes in the original one that repeated over and over again, and in this one, Danielle becomes a much more important character to the whole movie as well. So it's nice to see two of the characters kind of get beefed up a lot more in this. And then we get a couple of other new side characters, Ryan's lab mates who help him with the sissy machine. And so it's a nice ensemble in this one. It's a bigger ensemble than in the first one.
Yeah, it's super fun getting to see new characters mixed in with the old ones, seeing different sides of the old ones that we didn't see, like you said, with her roommate Lori, like when we actually get to see like what she's actually like as a person when she's not trying to kill Tree. I thought that like her performance, like getting to do a completely different thing, is super fun. And yeah, just like in general, like being able to like again like round up like such the same crew from the first one, and like same like I mean, I wonder if they even had to like reach back out to like these like same extras to be like, hey, we need to like shoot this scene again. Like, I know you were only in it for 2 minutes, but we need you. I find that like, they're kind of, again, like the attention to detail is like so great. So it's like, this is so the opposite of a lazy movie. There's so much effort and like thought that had to go into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that, this, especially this second movie, like the first movie, takes a lot of work to do, but then this second movie where you're having to recreate, like you said, there's like a lot of the same actors that the extras that you had to put in there, like the girl who was doing the petition, and that group of frat boys out on there. I'm sure there's a couple of people here and there that aren't exactly the same. I'm sure if you put them side by side, you'd see different actors or whatever. But the attention to detail was enough that you don't quite notice it, and so it's a nice. It's good to see them put in that much effort into a low tier horror movie, because these movies didn't cost a lot, so it's definitely the effort it put into them is always appreciated for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Like these are super underrated for me, and again, like I desperately want the third one.
Yes.
Like my title for the third one would be Happy Birthday Tree, but it's spelled out Happy Birthday or Happy Death Day, comma, and then the E's in Tree's names are 3s.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, I think that's the general consensus, is that most people want it to be a Happy Death Day Tree. Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully, I'm hopeful that we will eventually get them. Fingers crossed that Jason Blum gives it to him. Put it on Hulu. I don't care. Just make it and put it somewhere, like before it gets too much farther out.
I honestly don't see why that's like not the case. So like so anything that's on Blumhouse's slate right now, I'm going to see in theaters, just because in my far-fetched mind, I'm like, this money could go towards Happy Death Day 3. That's the ultimate goal behind standing Blumhouse at the moment, is ultimately to get this movie.
And I mean, Hulu has a good relationship with them. They made a whole bunch of original movies a couple of years ago. That they were doing every month.
Yeah, the Blumhouse of Terror, and then the Into the Dark series, and
Into the Dark series. Yeah. So yeah, they've had this previous relationship. So it's like, renew that, and put it somewhere. I don't care where you put it, just put it somewhere so I can watch it, please. I need the continuing chapter of this saga.
Expand into a mini series.
Oh my god!
Do a mini series continuation, like that could be fun. Like I just do find it fascinating that there are just like so many possibilities here, and like it's a shame that like there's so many ideas that could be had with it, but it's just money that holds these things back. It's like, it's unfortunate.
Absolutely. And it's funny too, because it obviously wasn't a lot of money, so it's like that there's there's room out there for it. There's money out there for it. It's like, just make it happen. And like you said, with the miniseries, that would actually open it up. Every episode could almost be a different genre in a way too, which would make it really fascinating as well. So there's so many avenues to go with this.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's many more ways that we could learn to kill tree. I'm a kill count devotee, so I did look up that tree dies 10 times in the first one, 8 times in the second one. So what final girl can say that they've died 18 times in their franchise? That's pretty dope.
Absolutely. That is. Yep. I mean, we've had a few people who've died. Like I know there's a couple of people who've died multiple times because of a shifting timelines in them. Like the nurse from the Halloween franchise has died a couple of times through different shifting timelines. But yeah, it's rare you get somebody who gets to die multiple times. So
yeah, canonically,
let alone 18 times.
Yeah, and it's usually the villain for the obvious reasons. So it's rarely the protagonist too, which I think that's super fun. I did so a few months ago. I did serve Jessica Rothe at my job, and and she was a total sweetheart. And she definitely has the enthusiasm of wanting to do a third one. She was like as soon as I get the call, I'm in. But awesome. it was really it was cool getting to talk to her, because I was like, hey, I know the like movies like didn't do like super popular. I was like online, you're a big hit. I was like, people love Tree as a final girl. And she was very endeared by that. She was like, oh my god, like that's so cool. And like it was funny because she was like having lunch with a friend. And so I remember like after I walked away, her friend was like super excited for her, like, oh my god, like he was like totally like recognize you as a fan, like you're it was like, so it was a very wholesome moment all around. She's awesome. a total sweetheart.
That's always good to hear. I love hearing that. I love hearing good fan actor interactions like that. So that's awesome. So all right, I think I am quite done with anything in this. Do you have anything else you want to mention about these movies that we haven't already mentioned?
No, I think we covered all the bases on it, and the consensus is I think we and you just need to start writing this the spec script for this third one.
There you go.
My last thought.
All right. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at _Daddy Disco. And then I do co-host my own podcast, the Specter Cinema Club, with my buddy Garrett McDowell. And we focus on a different theme or subgenre every month, and then kind of get into the nitty gritty on those. So currently we are doing internet-based horror with like internet and social media type stuff, so like Spree and Tragedy Girls. So we got some fun episodes in there, and then coming up we're gonna be doing some aquatic horror and also some South Korean horror coming up. So we got a nice slate coming up the next couple of months. So you can find us new episodes every Tuesday on all podcast platforms and on Instagram and Twitter at Specter Cinema.
Sweet. That sounds awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I very much appreciate it. And I hope to have you on again in the future.
Hey, I'm there. I'm there whenever you want.
All right. Thanks again to DeVaughn for joining me. Next episode, Donna returns to talk about the first MCU event in the Avengers movie this Friday. And then on Monday, Donna is back. And so is my daughter, Katrina. And we'll be trying to avoid the traps in Escape Room and Escape Room Tournament of Champions. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at creepyandgeeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the Ko-fi page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.